The pain hit before I understood what caused it. A sharp pull under my ribs, hot and sudden, and my knees buckled against the cold metal wall of the cargo bay. Someone had come at me from the shadows between the containers, fast and silent, and now 3 men stood over me on the lower deck of Kethra Station, far from the cameras, far from any help. I pressed my hand against my side. Blood, warm and steady, slipped through my fingers. My mind raced through every mistake that led me here. I had walked this route 100 times. I thought I knew every shadow on this station. I was wrong. The men were arguing above me, quick words in a dialect I only half understood. Something about my credit chip, my boots, whether to leave now or finish what they started. I tried to focus, tried to find a way out, but my body would not listen. My vision blurred at the edges. Then I heard it. A low sound, rolling up from somewhere behind the men. A sound that did not belong to anything I had ever heard on this station before. Not a growl exactly. Something deeper. Something that seemed to come from the floor itself, rather than from any living throat. I knew that sound. I had heard it only once before, months ago, and I had hoped never to hear it again, because the last time I heard it, a man twice my size had walked away from Bramble with his arm in a sling and his pride shattered into pieces. Bramble was mine, or I was his. After 11 months together, the line between those two ideas had become impossible to draw. I need to explain something, because most people get this wrong. Bramble looks like a cat. Silver fur, long body, quiet paws, the kind of creature you would expect to find curled up asleep on a warm shipping crate, uninterested in anything except food and sunlight. That is exactly how he had spent the last hour, up on a stack of containers, soaking in the station lighting, while I made my delivery run below. But a Vashke is not a cat. That word is just the closest thing humans had when we first met them. A word that tells you almost nothing true about what they actually are. The 3 men above me went quiet. One of them looked up toward the containers, and his face changed. I could not see what he saw, not from where I lay, but I heard his voice shake when he spoke again. "It's just an animal," he said, though it sounded like he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. The growl did not stop. If anything, it grew lower, filling the space between the containers, like something solid pressing down on all of us. Then Bramble spoke. He did not have a voice built for human words, and every time he used one, I could hear what it cost him, a strain running underneath the sound, like a machine forced to do something it was never designed for. "Whoever did that," he said, each word slow and deliberate, "doesn't know what we are." I had heard him speak 4 times in 11 months, once to warn me the local water supply was unsafe, once during a trade negotiation, when he decided our quarters were not good enough, and made that opinion known to an entire room of station officials. Twice to insult me, usually about my cooking. He never spoke without a reason. He never wasted the effort. He was not wasting it now. The man who had hurt me laughed, but the sound cracked halfway through. "Kick it off the crate," he told the others. "Let's finish this and go." Nobody kicked Bramble anywhere. He simply was not on the crate anymore. One moment he sat above us in the dim light, and the next he was on the deck, close enough that the men scattered backward, and I still could not tell you how he crossed that distance. It was not a jump. It was something smoother than that, like the space between 2 points had simply stopped existing for him. Here is what most people never learn about the Vashke, what took me almost a year of asking careful questions to piece together. They found humanity a long time before most of the galaxy even knew Earth existed. They watched us quietly for decades before making contact, studying us the way you might study a language before speaking it out loud. And when they finally did make contact, they were not looking for pets, and they were not looking for masters. They were looking for something else, a partner, a packmate. In the deepest sense their culture understood that word. Nobody I ever asked could fully explain why they chose humans out of every species they had observed. The closest answer I ever got came from an old trader named Oliver, who told me the Vashki valued one thing above everything else: loyalty that did not calculate first. Humans, when someone we cared about was threatened, did not stop to weigh the odds. We simply acted. According to Oliver, nothing else the Vashke had ever studied worked quite that way, and for a species built entirely around loyalty to the pack, that difference mattered more than anything. So when the bond is real, when it runs both directions the way mine did with Bramble, hurting one half of that bond does not simply anger the other half. It changes something. Two separate creatures that have spent years learning to think and move, almost as one, suddenly become something neither of them fully controls anymore. I do not remember standing up. I remember my hand closing around the fire extinguisher, bolted to the wall beside me, tearing it free, and I remember the sound of the nearest man shouting as Bramble moved past him faster than my eyes could follow. That low growl never stopped. It never even changed rhythm, as if some part of him was keeping time with something the rest of us could not hear. I swung the extinguisher at the second man because he was closest, because some instinct older than thought had taken over completely. I was still bleeding. I could feel it running warm down my side with every movement. But the fear that had frozen me minutes ago was gone, replaced by something sharper, something that only shows up when someone you care about is in danger, and every calculation stops mattering. It was over quickly. The two men who had stayed nearest to me were no longer in any condition to continue, and the third had already turned and fled the moment Bramble crossed the deck toward him. Bramble did not chase him. He never wasted energy on someone who had already given up. I slid back down against the container wall, the extinguisher slipping from my hand, my legs finally giving out now that the danger had passed. The adrenaline that had kept me upright drained away all at once, and the pain in my side returned twice as strong. Bramble was on my chest before I finished sliding down. He was never gentle, not in the way people imagine when they picture a cat curling up beside someone hurt. His paws pressed against my wound with exact, careful pressure, weight measured to the smallest degree, stopping the bleeding without causing more damage. The growl finally softened into something else, something closer to the sound he made over food, except wrong somehow, except heavier, like grief wearing the shape of comfort. "Stupid," he said, and I could hear how much that single word cost him. "Watch your corners next time." "Good to see you too," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Station security arrived a few minutes later. I never learned exactly how Bramble called them, some trick involving the station's drone network that he refused to explain, no matter how many times I asked. A young medic knelt beside me, working quickly, glancing nervously at the silver shape refusing to move from my chest, growling softly at anyone who reached toward me too fast. "What is that?" she asked her supervisor, an older woman who barely looked up from my wound. "A bonded Vashke," the supervisor answered, calm and unbothered, as if this happened every week on this station. Whoever did this picked the one person on this deck they really should not have touched. Bramble's ears flicked at those words, but he did not stop watching the entrance, did not stop making sure nothing else came near us. Later, once I was stitched up and resting in a narrow infirmary bed, half asleep from the medication, Bramble curled against my side with his tail draped over his nose. I asked him, quietly, why he had spoken at all. Why bother explaining anything to men who were never going to understand it? Men who were about to lose any chance to think about it further. He was silent for a long moment, drifting toward the deep sleep he always needed after using so much energy. "Wasn't for them," he finally murmured, barely more than a breath. "Was so you would hear it too, in case you forgot." I had not forgotten. Lying there in that quiet infirmary room, listening to his slow breathing beside me, I understood something I had somehow missed during 11 months together. This bond was never about protection in one direction only. It was never simply him watching over me, or me watching over him. It was something neither of us had fully chosen, and neither of us could fully explain. Something older than either species. Something that turned two very different lives into a single thread that neither one of us could imagine cutting. Outside the infirmary window, the lights of Kethra Station blinked steadily against the dark, ships coming and going, traders moving through corridors unaware of what had happened just a few decks below them. Life on the station continued exactly as it always had, indifferent to the moment that had nearly ended mine. But I was still here, bruised, stitched, exhausted, but here, because a creature the size of a common cat had decided, long before I ever understood what that decision meant, that I was worth everything he had. I reached over and rested my hand on his back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing beneath my palm. He did not wake. He did not need to. Some things do not require words to be understood, and after everything that had happened that night, this was the simplest truth of all. Whatever came next, whatever other shadows waited between whatever other containers on whatever other stations across this galaxy, I would not be facing them alone. And for the first time since the blade had found my side, that thought alone was enough to let me finally close my eyes and rest.